Malaysia now, you know, it no longer includes the island off the tip that is Singapore, but Corner made all kinds of amazing discoveries, named lots and lots of species, a lot of boletes. So I was really excited to go to Singapore thinking, man, I'm going to see a lot of mushrooms. Well, it turns out I really didn't see many mushrooms at all. And the ones that I did see were cosmopolitan things that you would see anywhere, you know, common sapphirellas and wood rotters and stuff like that. I didn't see much at all, but I did encounter a few things that were really bizarre. This one is this black bolete here, shown in those two top photos. Phlebopus portentosus, the black bolete. Very popular edible mushroom in Southeast Asia, and they cultivate it. And I'd known about this mushroom, and I'd eaten it, but I never saw it being grown. I assumed it was harvested from the woods, but no, it's actually cultivated. They grow it in fields, and you can even fruit it in flower pots. So the business with our books in the West, always talking about boletes being mycorrhizal, they're always with trees and stuff. That's not totally true. There's some that are not necessarily mycorrhizal. This thing will grow in fields where they also cultivate rattan, which is what's turned into wicker furniture and baskets and stuff. But it doesn't have to have rattan or any other plant. Like I say, you can grow it in flower pots and things like that. So it's kind of an interesting bolete to see growing with no other trees around, just like out in the bare field. Of course, in Singapore and everywhere in Illinois, you'll see this one, the green gill, Chlorophyllum molybdites. This is something that everyone should be on the lookout for because it can be common in the summertime when you get some drenching showers, but you should also be on the lookout for it because it causes a lot of poisonings every year. It looks like these great big, nice, tasty lepiotas, but it's fairly poisonous and does cause a lot of poisonings. So everyone that knows mushrooms knows, well, how could you get poisoned? It has green gills because it's our only mushroom that makes green spores. Well, it turns out it doesn't really, the gills don't really turn green until it gets really mature, in fact, almost over mature. So if you see that fairy ring there, and that shot was from Alabama, I think, I would wager that most of the mushrooms, maybe all the mushrooms in that fairy ring, would not even be showing green gills yet. And that's the stage when you would think to be picking lepiotas. So there's no wonder this thing causes a lot of problems. Super common in the tropics. So on islands and throughout Southeast Asia, you see it everywhere. It's one of the most common mushrooms all over the world. So moving from Singapore over to Thailand and Laos, show you a couple interesting things. So went to an International Mycological Congress a few years ago. In fact, Greg Mueller's watching this. He was there as well. This was in Bangkok. Up in the northeast part of Thailand, I took a group to go to this Khao Yai National Park. You see the name up there. It's a World Heritage Site. And in the jungle areas, there's a lot of really amazing mushrooms to see, termitomyces and cocaina and stuff like that. But out in the open like this, there was also something I wanted to see. My daughter took this photo. She went along with me. She was an exchange student at a Thai school at the time. So we went out to this area where there's these large, almost savanna areas. And you see that monk walking there by himself. The grass is almost shoulder high. It's this really amazing savanna grass. And you can see, besides that dirt path he's walking on there, you can see what looks like kind of other paths through that grass. So again, that grass is almost shoulder high. So what do you think could be making these paths through the grass? This is the Southeast Asian elephant that goes through there. And so one of the things I wanted to see was some of these areas where wild elephants were living, because where you have wild elephants, you have some pretty cool dung fungi, including this really neat Copelandia cyanescens, which is powerfully hallucinogenic. But it's just really cool to see growing in these massive piles of dung, which can be, you know, half the size of a Volkswagen sometimes. Pretty cool. So we sure enough saw these things and a lot more. Back in the jungle area, we saw saprobes, like these gorgeous little cocainas. And getting shots like this in really, really dark jungle areas requires, of course, tripods and a lot of time and long exposures. And what's really cool is when everyone's kind of huddled around on the ground, taking photos of these things, you start to notice the ground is moving and writhing. And there's just thousands and thousands of these terrestrial leeches that rear up from the ground when they smell your breath, your exhale. They rear up from the ground and start marching all towards you. And everyone was really freaking out. And I said, this is really kind of cool to see how acute their sense of smell is. Here, let's all move like 10 feet over here. So we all picked up and moved our stuff over. And sure enough, now they all change direction. They start all marching towards us. I mean, literally thousands of them. So it's really kind of cool to see and also kind of freaky too. But a lot of neat things on the ground. These cochinas, very long stemmed and rooted termitomyces and a polypore called amateurishly. A lot of really neat things to see. So we had a great time up there. Next to Thailand is Laos, which I very much enjoy going to. It's maybe my favorite country in the world to visit, Laos, as well as maybe Italy. This is the biggest city, Vientiane, which is pretty much a kind of a backwater village. This was the scene across the street from my little guest house every day. The monks will be coming down the street. So in Laos, it's kind of hard to get around. It's very jungly. There's not really hardly any paved roads. So it's not like Thailand or even North America where there's parks with paths and trails and stuff you can go on to go looking for mushrooms. But in talking to people, everyone said, oh, Lao people are foragers anyway. So whatever's out in the woods, they'll be bringing it into the market because that's how people eat. So all kinds of wild meat, fish, salamanders, there are herbs and a lot of vegetables are foraged and a lot of mushrooms too. A lot of mushrooms. A lot of people eat tremendous numbers of mushrooms. A lot of stuff we wouldn't eat here too. A lot of corals and russulas and stuff like that. So everyone said, rather than try to get into the forest, which you'll just end up getting lost or die or something, just go to the market every day. It changes every day, all the different mushrooms coming in. So that's what I did. So I lucked out. One day there was big baskets of these big yellow Caesar amanitas, Amanita hemibatha, which is a very popular edible mushroom. And, you know, around the world, there's a lot of different Caesar amanitas that are popular, and Southeast Asia is no exception. So the people selling them, of course, they couldn't speak English, so I didn't really have any way of finding out what this was. But as luck had it, there was a guy coming down the way leading a group of a couple people, and he could speak English, and he was pointing out what was going on. So I said, say, can you come over here and I want to make some notes on this mushroom. I'm going to buy it and go eat it, but I'm going to make some notes. I study mushrooms. Can you ask the person what they call it and what trees it grows with and stuff like that? So the guy said, oh, sure. So they're talking, and then he turns to me and says, this is called the egg yellow mushroom. And in Thai, I didn't catch the name in Lao, and they have a lot of just kind of local names. So the Thai name is Het Kai Han. And so they said in Lao, this was the egg yellow mushroom. So I bought, of course, the entire basket and took it back to the guest house, asking them how they would prepare it and everything, gave them about half of it, and then would take the mushrooms over across the street to the restaurant, and they would fix them for me, and then I get to taste them. So, okay, that was great. Egg yellow mushroom, this big Amanita hemibatha. It's a beautiful looking thing. There's some other Amanitas too that are popular edibles like this guy here, which are quite dangerous looking, and more on that in a second. So, but cruising through the market, you can see all kinds of wild creatures, insects. So they call these giant ants. They're not an ant at all. You can see they come out of a nest. It's like a carpenter bee, great big thing. They're really tasty, kind of have like a hazelnutty cream cheese.
I want to talk on mushrooms.
Hazelnutty cream cheese taste, all kinds of nuts and fruits. And of course, they let you try everything. It's really great. Lao people are just awesome. All kinds of mushrooms. You can see down there in the bottom left, several types of Caesar amanitas, russulas. They're all thrown together because people, I guess they're really not worried about eating stuff. Those brown ones are termitomyces. They have real long roots and they go down to termite nests. And then over here on the right-hand side, you can see all the coral mushrooms, more termitomyces. They're real cheap, the termitomyces. They're kind of bland and super common, so everybody eats them just because they're so cheap. Their favorite mushroom of all in Laos are those gray coral mushrooms, which I tried and are absolutely bland, just like they are everywhere. But boy, the Lao people love them. And of course, they call them the old man's beard, just like we would call some of them here in North America. The most expensive mushroom far and away in Lao are those small yellow chanterelles. And the name of those is Cantharellus, I forget, Asiaticus or something like that. It has a name. I asked the guy, oh, what's the name of this mushroom here? So a guy that could speak English, he's chatting away with the Lao person, says, oh, this one called egg yellow mushroom. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's a chanterelle. This looks nothing like the other one that this other guy told me the other day. So I'm telling this guy, there's a great big yellow mushroom with like a sac on the bottom. I was told that's called the egg yellow mushroom. He's like, oh, okay, let me see. So he's chatting with this guy, a big discussion. So he's like, oh, okay, yeah, I have the full name. Full name of this one is called the egg yellow mushroom. That's not the big egg yellow mushroom. That's literally what they told me. So you know how common names are. They're the same everywhere. People have common names that are really not so great. They're kind of ambiguous. Anyways, that chanterelle is wonderful. Now back to this big white amanita. Would you eat this thing? Boy, it sure looks like a destroying angel, doesn't it? Looks deadly. It's not. It's a big white Caesar amanita, Amanita princeps, very common all throughout Asia, China. It's very popular edible, and I definitely ate it, and it was fantastic. But it's really kind of scary to see because it looks so much like our destroying angel. And this is probably the reason, by the way, this mushroom here is probably the reason why Southeast Asians in North America die from eating death caps and other destroying angel type amanitas. This is such a common mushroom. About half of the year in the market, this mushroom is available. And so when Lao people are in the Midwest or in Northern California, where a lot of Hmong people have settled, they get in trouble eating some of the destroying angel amanitas because it looks just like the one back home, but it definitely is not just like the one back home. The one we have is definitely deadly. Okay, so we'll leave Lao and Thailand, and we'll cross Wallace's Line to Australia. If you know what Wallace's Line is, it's this area of the globe where it's named for Alfred Russel Wallace, where the Earth is sort of turning itself inside out, where the plates move to the east and west of this line, such that Australia is moving east away from Asia, and Asia's moving, or Australia is moving west away from. No, I had it right the first time. Sorry. Australia is moving east away from Asia, and Asia is moving west. So the two land masses were never stuck together. So you have vastly different creatures east and west of Wallace's Line. So things like marsupials in Australia and placentals in Europe and North America. So there are a lot of exciting things to see, vastly different from what we know back here. At the same time, stuff looks just like back home. There's Amanita muscaria, variety muscaria. This is the so-called true Amanita muscaria. This is the European one. And while it looks quite similar to the Western muscaria in that it's red with white patches, it's quite aggressive and has spread all over the world. It's all over south of the equator and all throughout Europe and even in North America, as I'll show you in a little picture in a second. So you encounter this mushroom all over the planet. It hitches a ride on the roots of all kinds of forest trees and horticultural types of trees that's moved all around the country. So you see that in Australia, but you see it just about everywhere. I've seen it in South America. It's in Southern Hemisphere, Africa, all throughout Europe and Asia, and even in North America. It's known from Alaska, Humboldt County, California, and even from Massachusetts. So we do have it in North America, and it's probably spreading because, again, it can partner with so many different types of mycorrhizal trees. This is beautiful Amanita muscaria, variety muscaria from Chile that we saw 2 years ago on a tour I was leading through parts of Chile. This was in a plantation of spruce trees, so it got brought down there with these European spruces. It does look a little different from the West Coast or the Western Amanita muscaria. The red is a little more vibrant red, and it doesn't have the yellow fringe on the edge of the velar warts and on the ring. So you can kind of tell the difference, but the average casual glance, you would just think this is a regular run-of-the-mill red Amanita muscaria. We were cruising through this plantation, which of course is devoid of mushrooms except for muscaria. We're cruising through this plantation to get to the other side because we're going to do another foray, but we finally were just compelled to stop because there were literally in the field of view just tens of thousands of these things. The ground was almost covered for miles. It was really something to see. So we did what comes next. We piled out of our 4 vans, took photos, and more photos, and then a fight ensued whereby we were throwing these things at each other, and it was madness. But we took some solace thinking that wasn't really a native species, so we didn't really mind trashing them and getting out some energy there. if you're interested, by the way, in seeing a lot of really cool mushrooms like these Amanita aurantiovelatas, which are really striking to see, we were supposed to be doing another Chile tour right this moment, in fact, but it got canceled because of COVID-19. So we will try to reload and do it again next spring if you think you want to go. It's kind of cool because our springtime up here, which other than morels, there's not too much to see. That's the middle of the fall mushroom season down there. So you can quite literally see everything. Bizarre amanitas like this, to even more bizarre amanitas like this that's not even been described and doesn't have a name, a big slimy type Caesar. It was really gorgeous. And then crazy forests like these Araucaria or monkey puzzle tree forests, which are really amazing. And they're mycorrhizal with some things too. And then pretty much every color of the rainbow. None of these photos are photoshopped or anything. They're all the actual color of the mushrooms. Just really cool to see. A lot of stuff like Cortinarius, Enteloma, and Mycena, like you would have this familiar genera from back home, but the species are just vastly different. So anyways, if anyone's interested, you can just email me or something and head out with us next time. This was one of the stars of the show. Everyone wants to see Setaria when you go south of the equator, and we weren't disappointed. They were all over the place. We went into these forests of Nothofagus. That's what this tree is here, a Nothofagus species, and that's Setaria darwinii on the tree, named for Charles Darwin, who had one single trip around the world and collected stuff in South America, including these mushrooms. So if these mushrooms look kind of like morels to you, see the ones down there in the hot pink gloves, those are not morels, these are Setarias. It's because these are ascomycetes and they're somewhat closely related to morels. They live inside the tree, I guess as a parasite. They don't seem to harm the tree. And then when it's time to fruit in the fall, kind of late in the fall, they come popping out like these little wiffle balls, and they're quite edible and tasty. They are quite sweet tasting. In fact, it's really the only mushroom that makes appreciable amounts of sugar. So Mapuche Indians, the indigenous people of South America, for years and years and years have made kind of a wine-like beverage from fermenting these things, believe it or not. So kind of tasty to try and definitely freaky to see these things, you know, covering the trees all over the place. Pretty cool. Okay, and wherever the Nothofagus genus has traveled across the southern hemisphere, the Setaria mushrooms have gone with them. So there's several different species of Nothofagus that are not only in South America, but the southern end of Africa and Australia and New Zealand. And sure enough, there's been speciation of Setaria as well. So there's quite a few different species. Oh, we had Madagascar too. I see an arrow going to Madagascar there. So how did this happen? Did people take the trees around? No. This happened a long time ago when all the land masses were fused together, and it's going to be kind of small on your screen. A lot of these slides were made to be seen, I'm afraid, on like a big screen projection. So you may have to use like a magnifying glass or something, get in there kind of close. But you probably know the story anyway. A long time ago, all the land masses were attached to Pangea. And so, say, Amanita muscaria was all across Pangea. Well, when Pangea broke up into, say, Europe and North America, now you have two populations of Amanita muscaria. Those are reproductively isolated and become basically different species. And then from those, you have all kinds of other Amanitas that would happen, some in Europe and some different ones here in North America, and that's how speciation happens. Well, down in the southern half, similar thing happened. The southern tip of South Africa, or the southern tip of South America, southern tip of Africa, Australia, New Zealand was all attached. So that's how Nothofagus was already there, and then speciation takes over and you have different species. Some other neat things that happened as well. There's this marasmius that makes these sort of nets that traps foliage dropping from the forest. These things are known from the western region of Africa, and likewise they're known from South Americas too, especially the eastern side of South Africa, because again, or South America, because again, these two landmasses were connected at one time. If you're not familiar with this type of a marasmius, we have all kinds of other little leaf rotting marasmioid things in North America. This is really cool. These things, instead of being on the ground and rotting debris, leaves and twigs and things that's on the ground, these things make these cord-like rhizomorphs that span the trees in a jungle and form sort of a net, and debris raining down from the tree canopy, leaves and things like that, get stuck in the net, and these things fill up and just become full of rotting leaves and the fungus. So they kind of do a preemptive strike and don't let stuff get down on the ground where all of the other fungi are that are competing with them. They catch the stuff, keep it up off the ground. Of course, the air is very humid and wet because it's jungle, and they can rot the stuff in the air. So they're kind of neat to see. We have an article, this photo's by Noah Siegel. We have an article coming in an upcoming issue of Fungi magazine on these things. Noah sees them when he goes to Western Africa doing research with some other scientists all the time. And I'm quite fascinated by these things because I suspect there's probably other things that have co-evolved with them that lives inside of these big piles of leaves up off the ground. I'd kind of like to see what kind of bugs and things occur in there. Probably it's their own unique little, almost little biome. So you need to see. Okay, switching gears, we'll leave South America and travel back to Asia. We'll go to Japan and see some cultivated things. So long time ago, when I was finishing up as a doctoral student, I was sent to Japan to give a presentation at a pretty prestigious conference. It was very exciting, and I was actually planning to do a postdoc there. So I was kind of traveling around, seeing some research facilities, and that's where I thought I was going to end up. I didn't because some other stuff happened. So, but anyways, got to see a lot of different Asian mushrooms on farms and in labs and in the forest and in grocery stores. It was really eye-opening. So this, of course, is just, your common shiitake mushroom. Saw them being grown everywhere, all kinds of different shiitakes that look nothing like this. It was pretty neat. And other mushrooms like Foliota and Namiko, which we hardly even know here in North America. Nobody eats them because they're kind of slimy. I think they're pretty wonderful. You can cultivate these. In fact, I did cultivate these. These are really popular. These are maybe the top 1 or 2 different edible mushrooms eaten in Japan. Everyone eats these things. Pretty neat. But where I'm going with this is visiting these farms, you would see, and this is kind of a bad photo, I'm afraid, but visiting these farms where they're grown, they're kind of small mom and pop operations, and they often grow like a little patch of rice and a few other things, but they're incredibly sustainable to the extent where they'll have a stack of oak logs, they'll drill those and grow shiitakes out of them for the family to consume as well as to sell. When the log's used up after 2 or 3 years, and you've probably grown shiitakes at home too, they get used up after a few years, they throw the log now into a grinder, grind it up into chips or dust, add some grain and some other supplements, bag it up, maybe mix it with straw and then fruit oyster mushrooms out of it. And of course that fruits for a year or 2, that's used up. They grind up that, what's left over from that, because the oysters, there's nothing left for oysters, grind that up, add some other supplements, and then grow foliotas or, any number of things till eventually, after all of these different mushrooms down this pipeline, there's really nothing left at all. There's no chip of lignin or anything that they can throw out on the field. There's just nothing. The mushrooms just eat it all up. It's really fascinating. So no straw, no residue from the field, nothing goes to waste. Everything is put into growing mushrooms or feeding the livestock, and just totally sustainable. Really not a lot of input from other sources. Pretty cool to see. But you could grow these at home too, not just shiitake and oysters. You could grow Namiko and Ipsizygus and things like this. These are mushrooms grown in a bottle, but you can grow them in bags or off of logs or whatever. They're of course delicious to eat and very healthful. There's companies that sell ready-to-go kits if you want just like the easiest possible way to grow wild mushrooms or cultivated mushrooms. I mean, you can just tear this package open, soak it, and in 14 days you're picking mushrooms. Back to the Roots is a really good one. I've used theirs a bunch of times. So anyways, there's no reason, even in the middle of winter when you can't get out in the woods, there's no reason not to have fresh mushrooms at home. And plus it's just fun to do and you can get kids involved. Okay, let's hop back into the bus and head now to Europe. So we'll stop in Norway. I went to an IMC that was in Oslo, Norway a long time ago. It was more than 20 years ago. This was a great opportunity because I'd never been to Norway and it's extremely expensive to go there. So jumped at it. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we traveled there. And after the conference, we got to scoot around in the woods, of course, always looking for mushrooms. And sure enough, came upon these guys here. And boy, I thought I knew what they were based on the look. One smell, I definitely knew what they were. Matsutake. You can't mistake matsutake for anything. So gathered up a bunch of these, took them back to the house where I was staying, and the people there were like, "Oh God, what is that?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to eat these. These are matsutake." And they're like, "Oh no, you can't eat that." And so the mycologist I was talking to said, "No, this is not edible. I know about matsutake, yeah, but this is not it. This is called Tricholoma nauseosum. Real disgusting. Has that awful smell." I'm like, "No, that's a matsutake smell, and it smells wonderful." So ate them. Of course, they were delicious. Well, I don't know, flash forward another 10, 15 years, the Japanese market, of course, has exploded in demand for matsutake. There's no longer enough matsutake in Asia. There's not enough in North America. So now they're even going into Scandinavia. And so they were, Japanese pickers were picking these things. And when scientists got a hold of them and checked to see which tricholoma these were, they found out that, yeah, this is actually the same one that's in Asia. This is the true Tricholoma matsutake. And so now, of course, the Norwegians are like, "Oh yeah, we have the true matsutake here." And now everyone's eating them in Norway, when quite literally 20 years ago, they were stepping on them because they smelled foul. Now, for some reason, the same mushroom smells like gold to them. So whatever. That's Tricholoma matsutake, and there it was right in the forest outside our door where we were staying in Norway. So that was kind of cool to see. We have matsutake, of course, all throughout North America. I wouldn't advise collecting this way because that's kind of a mess. Those are dirty mushrooms, and I forget who gave me this photo, but that's not the way I picked them. Tricholoma out west is the great big matsutake that is probably more famous than the one in the east. Used to go by the name Tricholoma magnivaleri, but it's since been realized that this is actually should be called Burrelanianum because that was the name first. We have Tricholoma, we have the matsutake out here in the east, though a lot of people don't know about it. As far as in Illinois, I don't know, I've never found one, but in Wisconsin, I can tell you for sure there are plenty of matsutake in the late fall. Just drive straight up the lakes, heading up to, before you even get to Door County, once it starts getting real sandy, go in any of those parks along the lake and around any of those small scrubby pine trees. If it's around frost time of the year, you'll see matsutake if you're in luck, and they're quite spectacular. Okay, so we'll go south of Norway a little bit, down to Italy, and see what's there. Every year, I think I'll switch gears, by the way. Since we're in Italy, it's probably more appropriate to drink something Italian, so I'll have a Negroni now. So I have several drinks here, by the way. Have to keep myself awake. So every year I lead mushroom tours in Italy, and this is the type of place we go. We maybe see some sites in the big cities, but then we go out into kind of the hinterland and into some of these really old villages that are in really nice valleys or at the foot of these mountains where just mushrooms like crazy. Everyone's into mushrooms. The mushrooms are wonderful. The food's even more wonderful, and the wine's even more wonderful than that. So, and we're looking for pretty much anything, foraying like any forayers, but of course we're looking for edibles. So there's nothing better than the true king boletes of Italy. This is one of our mycologists that joins us all the time. This is Anna Maria Marini. She's one of the most famous mycologists in the world. She's one of the big shots of the Society Brazzadola, which is the Italian NAMA, and she's just a treat to be around. She quite literally knows every mushroom in Europe. And boy, she likes to eat mushrooms too, especially the king bolete. So one day we were out walking and picking each other's brain and everything. So I said, "So we haven't seen any king boletes today. So what are you going to do when you get back home?" She's like, "Oh, well, king boletes are not the best mushroom there is." And I couldn't think of one better. So I said, "Well, what is your favorite mushroom to eat?" She's like, "Oh, everyone knows Italians like king boletes and the Caesar mushroom, but that's not our favorite. Our favorite is a mushroom that's so popular, we've eaten it to almost extinction. And that's this guy here, Pleurotus nebrodensis, one of the rarest mushrooms in the world. It's named for the Nebrodi forest in northern Sicily, which is now, according to books and journals and a lot of scientists, this is about the only place it grows anymore. It's completely protected. You're not allowed to pick it. This is the host plant that you can see lying on the ground around it. It's ferula. It's a type of like a wild fennel it grows with. It's a weird kind of an oyster mushroom. Anyways, when we went to Sicily finally a couple years ago, I wanted to eat this thing. And when I was telling everyone in the group I wanted to eat this, all the Americans that were traveling with us that knew about this thing were shocked. They couldn't believe I was so despicable. This is like akin to wanting to go into a restaurant and eat whale meat, basically, before it goes extinct. But I was telling them, it's really not as rare as all the books say. Plus, it can be cultivated. And it really can. Here's another shot of it. You could see it growing with these little tufts of this fennel. So sure enough, I did get to eat it. The restaurants were all serving it because it is actually cultivated. Plus, a scientist in Italy that studies these things has assured me that there are other populations on mainland Italy where it occurs. Furthermore, it's actually all over the place. It just doesn't really fruit very often. So while the people did really diminish its habitat and have eaten it a lot, they're really not the main reason why it's become rare. But again, it can be cultivated. And here's a picture of it in cultivation here. So you too can likely eat it at home. It's really spectacular tasting, but I gotta say, I don't like it as much as king boletes or Caesar amanitas. Those are about as good as it gets, but still pretty good mushroom. It's definitely better than any other oyster mushroom by far. So if you see it on the menu someplace, give it a try. Okay, so next stop it looks like is going to be Central America. We'll go to Mexico. And we're getting closer to home now. So Mexico, of course, they are mushroom crazy. Maybe you didn't know that. If you get out in the hinterlands, especially in central Mexico, they're really into wild mushrooms. They have these big Caesars like this guy. They have festivals. There's mushrooms in the markets. They eat a lot of wild mushrooms, so it's really cool to see. But they also eat some really wacky things like huitlacoche or corn smut. This is the fungus Ustilago matus. It's a basidiomycete, but not an agaric type basidiomycete. It's a pathogen of corn. There's other species of Ustilago as well. This is a shot from our farm in Wisconsin where I used to grow it, and we would harvest quite a few pounds. I really like to eat this stuff. It's fantastic. It has very nice mushroomy flavor with kind of a little bit of corn flavor mixed in, and also some chocolate and even some vanilla flavors. It's really pretty neat and complex. When it's in season in Mexico, they go cuckoo for it. It's like a drug. You'll find it in everything. All the restaurants are serving. It's like truffle season in Italy. All the restaurants are making sauces, soups, stuffing roasted meat with it, making quesadillas. And also a lot of places serve my favorite way of preparing huitlacoche, which is an ice cream. And that's a real taste sensation too. Really, you'd be surprised. It's actually quite good. It sounds kind of gross. That's huitlacoche there on the ears on the cutting board in the bottom picture. And at our house, all the kids really liked it. So if they saw it growing, they would be nabbing it, bringing it in because they knew something special was about to happen. So love that huitlacoche. You can find it sometimes in cans. I don't recommend it. In cans, it looks disgusting and it has no flavor. So if you can find a Mexican market in summertime and ask, they usually don't have it sitting out. You usually have to ask and they might be able to pull some out from under the counter and sell it to you.
Like there's something about pangolins again.
Okay, so back to getting closer to home. So now North America, you can see I have some stars there of some of the spots I'll show you real quickly, just a few bizarre mushrooms from North America. So the upper right corner there, that star is on Newfoundland. So you can see how much further north that is than where we are in Chicago. The uppermost left star is Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And then the other places in between, you can probably figure out Colorado and Wisconsin and Missouri and et cetera, New York. So we'll start with Amanita wellsii, which is really beautiful Amanita mushrooms. You're probably seeing a theme here. I like to take pictures of Amanitas. It's a beautiful kind of orange peach looking thing and furry. It has an incredibly large distribution range over North America. I first saw it in Missouri where it grows with willows and certain weird kind of wet loving trees, and then travel all the way up to Newfoundland, thousands of miles away, and sure enough it grows there with these kind of subarctic trees. We're looking for mushrooms here in what's basically forest in Newfoundland, believe it or not, because it's kind of subarctic habitat. So the trees don't get very tall. They have to grow really low and kind of creep over the ground because they get this Arctic blast coming off the ocean, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner there. That's the Atlantic Ocean. It's extremely cold and always windy. So that little thing, it looks like a golf ball right in the middle of the screen. That's an Amanita wellsii there. It's kind of been bleached white from the sun and the wind. But it's towering over its mycorrhizal tree host, which is Arctostaphylos uva ursi, the so-called bearberry willow or bearberry. And again, a lot of the trees just kind of creep over the ground, don't get much taller than maybe an inch. So it's one of the few places you can see mushrooms that are taller than their tree mycorrhizal host. Kind of cool to see. And another oddball is this Ascocarini. This is a weird, fairly large ascomycete. This was the first time seen in North America, and that was on one of our trips to Newfoundland. There's a lot of stuff that's unique to Newfoundland. It might occur in Europe, but nowhere else in North America. So a lot of people think that maybe Newfoundland is sort of the first place where mushrooms kind of hit the North American soil. And it sort of stands to reason, because if you look at the map, how the air current and water currents move, look how far north England is over there in Europe versus North America. You can grow wine grapes, not necessarily great wine grapes, but you can grow wine grapes in England. You can't grow wine grapes in Newfoundland or across northern Canada or really hardly at all, and even in Wisconsin, which is quite a bit further south. So how is that? Well, how it is because the warm air from the Gulf of Mexico moves up to England and is quite mild. The cold air comes back down from Scandinavia and hits North America. And the first place it hits there is that circle, which is Newfoundland. So we have a lot of species that are known from Europe and Newfoundland, but nowhere else in North America. So the thought is that's the first place these spores hit when the wind is coming across. I don't know if it's true, but it stands to reason. And well, I'm 3 or 4 cocktails into this lecture, so it's just the way it's going to have to be. Okay, so some other neat things, some oddball and some large things. Out on the West Coast, truffling with this guy here on the left, Jack Cernacki, very famous chef and mushroom cookbook writer. Got to truffle with him a time or two out west and seen some amazing things. Also out west, you can see a massive agaricon mushroom. This tree I'm leaning against here is the largest known Sitka spruce on Earth. And above my head, way up there, is about the size of a Volkswagen, this giant agaricon mushroom that is certainly decades old, if not more, and there are a whole bunch of them further up the tree. You got to figure that these so-called microbes, fungi or microbes, this center of this tree is probably full of tons or hundreds of tons of this one fungus, yet we would consider that a microbe. So that's kind of an interesting thought. This agaricon is one of the medicinal mushrooms that people believe is responsible for longevity and stuff like that. And it kind of stands to reason. That thing's been hanging off that tree for obviously decades, because it puts out a very thin hymenium on the bottom every year. And you can see it's obviously got many, many layers thick. Some other large mushrooms. These are from North Carolina, from a Nama foray that was in North Carolina. This was the table that had the big ones on it. There's a big Ganoderm applanatum, which of course we have in Illinois, and a big Bondredzeffia berkeleyana, which we have in Illinois, that big tan polypore looking thing, and then a big jack-o'-lantern there in the front, a big, which we have in Illinois as well. So all 3 of those you could be likely to see at a foray in Illinois. Looks like Larry Evans there. I was trying to figure out who that guy is with the beard. I guess it's Larry Evans. That's what he's talking about. If you've never been to a Nama foray, they're a blast and you learn a lot of stuff. I'll have a little advertisement for them in just one second. But first off, a couple other festivals as we wind this thing down. So if you want to know what some of the best and biggest mushroom forays to go to are, I can recommend a few. And these are great because in one day under one roof, you can see all the mushrooms that are out, hundreds of species, talk to a bunch of myco crazies like you, selling all kinds of products, vendors, all kinds of food. It's really a lot of fun. And a lot of times each individual fair cooks up mushrooms that are kind of indigenous just to that region. So this is the Puget Sound Fair in Seattle, which happens in October. It's one of my favorites. I go every year. So you could expect people would be cooking up matsutake and chanterelles that are from out there, which tastes quite a bit different from ours. Like they have white chanterelles out there. So a nice fair to go to. You'll see stuff like the matsutake, and you'll get to learn It's lookalikes. So that's a true matsutake on the right. That's a Smith's ammonite on the left, which is poisonous and in fact has killed people. And people get poisoned by it all the time because it looks remotely like a matsutake, which oftentimes are kind of shaggy like that and maybe less brown. So you could mistake the two. December, the best foray best fair would have to be the San Francisco Club's fair, the Mycological Society of San Francisco. They do it right in Golden Gate Park in a spectacular hall of flowers, and they have these woodland scenes set up with hundreds of species that you can peruse and see what's out. There's all kinds of boletes in the Bay Area, and they have the largest of all the king bolete species in North America. You've heard of Boletus edulis, the king bolete from Europe. Well, this is Boletus grandedulis, which is a monster. That's my buddy Haney there, hoisting this thing up. And he was excited because it was totally bug-free. And then a little dismayed because it wouldn't fit in his basket. So he had to actually lash it to the back of his camper there to drive it home. And he thought that was kind of like a Johnny Appleseed type moment whereby he was probably spreading spores all over Marin County as he drove this thing home. I'm not sure about that, but I got to taste that big bolete. It was pretty spectacular. So good for him. You can learn about things like death cap mushroom, which is quite common in the Bay Area in the fall, and people get poisoned every year and die most years, believe it or not. We don't have death caps in the Midwest yet, but they're probably coming this way because they've been spreading all up and down the east and west coast. They look like a lot of other mushrooms, so you can't be too careful. This is them there. Amanita phalloides. Those were picked in the East Bay. Some years there are just millions of them out. They're one of the most common mushrooms in some areas, and they're all over the world. People get poisoned in Australia and all throughout Asia and Africa and South America every year. So it's moving around. January is a really nice fair in Santa Cruz, California. Really pretty. It's out on this kind of peninsula where Santa Cruz is, and the mushrooms are just totally incredible. They set up these beautiful woodland scenes in this hall with all the mushrooms and pretty baskets, and people are making all kinds of great food and candy cap ice cream, and it's one of the real treasures of morel or of mushroom festivals in North America. Where Santa Cruz is, they have some really unique habitat on this peninsula, and at the mushroom fair they show off some of the species that are endemic. So these are a couple different species of candy caps here. We have candy caps that are different species in the Midwest. Some of the species that are unique to Santa Cruz, though, these endemic ones, live in this so-called Zayante soil. These are sort of like sand dunes right off the ocean that is this peninsula. There's a number of different trees and other plants, as well as several mushroom species that are known only from there. This is literally like one state park that's not even that big. It's the only place in the world for some of these things, which includes this Amanita zayantiensis, which is getting described and named by Christian Schwartz, if you know who he is. He's on Facebook all the time. So just a really special place to go and see a lot of different types of trees you can see nowhere else in the world. And it's just right there, right outside of town. Kind of neat. One of the last couple stops on our trip will be in August. That's to the Telluride Mushroom Festival, the largest mushroom festival in North America. And it's quite a treat for the senses. It's in this old mining town in the mountains. The elevation there in the town is 8,700 feet, and we go up to about 10,500 to 11,000 feet, which is where we foray, and a lot of spectacular mushrooms up there. The neat thing about Colorado is they pretty much get the entire mushroom season all in 1 month. Everything's kind of compressed to this one rainy month. So everything from morels all the way through to chanterelles, boletes, amanitas, all fruit in the same month. So you could see them all in one table. Last year, there was a tremendous number of morels that were picked at about 11,000 feet because the snow was just then melting in August. And so the morels were coming out from some burns that they'd had. So everybody was picking fire morels. And if you got tired of picking that, then you go drop down a couple thousand feet, pick king boletes, get tired of that, drop down a couple thousand more feet, pick Caesar amanitas and chanterelles, and basically whatever you want. You just, on the same mountain, you can just drop down a couple thousand feet and start picking something else. I'm really not interested in too much other than this guy here. This is the Rocky Mountain king bolete, Boletus rubriceps. For people that have eaten all the different king boletes from North America. Most agree this is the best tasting one. This is the red-capped king bolete. Look at that stem with the reticulation. There's no doubt that's a king bolete when you see something like that. You'll see a lot of these mushrooms at Telluride. The Telluride Mushroom Festival started 40 years ago as a psychedelics conference with a lot of scientists and researchers coming to discuss this and therapies, because of course psychedelics were legal therapies for people in the 50s and even into the 60s. And still to this day, the festival still has a fairly large psychedelics presence with experts from around the world talking about clinical research or treating people. So this is still on the docket. There's other things that go on. Ceremonies and curanderas from Central America might demonstrate how some of these presentations happen, just as they did with the Mayas hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So that's kind of cool to see as well. There's a lot of different stuff. The festival always has, certainly over 40 different presenters, and hundreds to thousands of people go every year. It's pretty neat. Pretty much anything having to do with wild mushrooms is there. Kind of cool to see. And it's a beautiful setting. You can ride the gondolas and act up like they did back in the hippie days. You can see these are some of the early hippies back in the day. The guy in the bottom right is the founder of the festival, Dr. Emanuel Saltzman, who just died last year, or died 2 years ago. He was in his 90s. He was a medical doctor in Denver. The guy above him is Art Goodtimes, one of the real characters of the festival, kind of the heart and soul of the festival. And Art's now lost his beard because he's going through cancer chemotherapy and just starting to recover from that. This was obviously back in his younger days. You can see a picture of him in the upper right-hand corner there, what he looks like more recently, although again, without the beard. And then the real energy of the festival is always Gary Linkoff, our real leader there in the middle, and we miss him terribly. He also died just a couple years ago. So he was another one of the founders. So back closer to home, these people are the Missouri Mycological Society. They put on one of my favorite annual forays every year. I've been numerous times, and they are hosting the NAMA foray this year, if it happens, which I think maybe it's not going to happen, but hopefully they'll just move it back a year, because they throw a wonderful event and they have a lot of really cool mushrooms in Missouri. This photo sadly was taken several years ago, so I see people in the photo that have now left us. Wow, that's kind of too bad. The lady down in the bottom right corner with the light blue sweater on, that's Maxine Stone. She's been the driving force of the Missouri Club for years, and she's pretty much kind of the main organizer. Across the front row there, right in the front with that tan t-shirt on, that's Jay Justice, my co-author of the Amanitas book, and to his right is Sherry and Skip Kay. They're the driving force of the Kansas Club, and Skip just died just a couple months ago. So there's a few other people I see in the crowd too that have died too. So you got to get out there with your friends and morel and mushroom hunt, because you just never know how much more time we have. So Missouri, this is why Missouri is special. There's a lot of neat things down there. You don't have to go to Italy or Washington or Chile. You can find stuff that's really cool in the Midwest. This is an Amanita species that still doesn't have a name. It's called Amanita SPT44 on the official Amanita website. And my daughter discovered it when she was 7 years old at a foray in Missouri. So anyone listening right now, you too can discover a new species. This is the guide to the mushrooms of Missouri. There's only, I think, 3 or 4 people pictured in the book. My daughter is one of them, because she's found a lot of neat things in Missouri and has made quite a name for herself. She's obviously older than that now and in college, and mushrooms aren't cool anymore, but they were cool back then, and she knew Amanitas for sure. She's pointing to it right there. Probably the best foray, according to sources, I might be a little biased, is the Northwoods foray that happens up in the northwest corner of Wisconsin every year in Bayfield, and probably a lot of people that are tuned into this have been to it. This is a really special place with very high diversity and just a great place to go. It's such a small town. The town of Cable is in Bayfield County, which is the 2nd largest county in Wisconsin. It doesn't have a single stoplight in the entire county. It's just all national forest and just wonderful. We go up every fall, see all kinds of amazing rare species. In fact, lots and lots of rare species, and a lot of really good identifiers from the Midwest. Patrick from the Illinois Club, Brooke Reed from the Illinois Club, another expert. There in that right-hand photo with the ponytail is Tavis Lynch, a real expert. He's from Wisconsin, and across the table from is Arnie Martinson. He's another expert. The bottom left corner is Peter and Colleen Vahuska from the Wisconsin Club, although they now have retired and moved to Minnesota, holding a really amazing netted rhodotus, which probably no one that's dialed in has ever seen before. It's really beautiful mushroom. It's on everyone's life list. And that, of course, is a Volvariella in the hand there in the upper left. And there's lots of other reasons to go to this foray. It's close to home. You can get there on a pretty easy drive. It's usually just beautiful conditions out in the fall with the colors already changing and lots of edibles. Here's a family that obviously each one picked their favorites. One has boletes and one has trumpets and corals, and one has suillus and hedgehogs and some sort of a look like a pink chanterelle there. And anyways, we pick lots of edibles. Most of the time we're only after the black trumpets because they're out in force, but there's a lot of other things to pick too that are really cool. And we see lots of species. But again, you don't even have to go up there. You can stay right here at home and see a lot of really cool stuff. This is a picture that Brooke Reed from the Illinois Club sent to me. They just saw a couple days ago, super rare mushroom, Coleoriza hygrophoroides, the false wax cap. Super rare mushroom. It's only been seen in the Midwest a few times. I was checking on Mushroom Observer. There's no observations anywhere but the West Coast on there. And there's only, I think, a couple observations on iNaturalist. Really amazing find. So you don't have to leave your county to see a lot of cool stuff, even in this time of pandemic. Here's Patrick Leacock holding up another rare mushroom. This is Lactarius atravirdis, this beautiful green Lactarius. And Patrick's a rare gem just to himself. So those are two rare gems there in one photo. Anyways, I'll wind up by saying this. Not only do you not have to go far to find rare things, but anyone in a mushroom club can make amazing contributions to science and find rare things. I'll give you an example. I know most of the NAMA clubs, at least the bigger ones, have a lot of people. Most of those clubs have an amateur in their club, not a scientist, but an amateur who's discovered a new species to science, believe it or not. And people ask me all the time, have you discovered a new species, or do you know anyone? I'm like, yeah, I know lots of people have discovered new species. A lot of people are just like you in clubs. You just have to keep your eyes open and look for stuff and pay attention and be observant and also just kind of be patient and take notes and photos and just be really observant more than anything. But here's an example of amazing stuff you can see right in the Midwest. And I'll use the genus Pluteus as an example. There's nothing more boring and uninteresting, frankly, than the genus Pluteus. No one would deny that. This mushroom doesn't have much going for it. They're mostly like this Pluteus cervinus here, which you'll probably be seeing now when you're out looking for morels. It's a boring mushroom that's brown, grows on wood. The gills will turn pink, but that's about it. There's not really any other features about it. It's edible, but boring and bland and pretty much tasteless, so nobody really picks it. There's a white species too that we'll see. That's about it. So no one ever gets excited for Pluteus. It's as vanilla as it gets, except not always. Some Pluteus actually are pretty astounding. So including these two across the top row, Pluteus thompsonii, which is wrinkled and kind of gray, is just gorgeous. But you have to look close to find this thing. It's not often seen. All these photos, by the way, were taken in the Midwest within 100 miles of here, of where we are right now. So this Pluteus thompsonii, beautiful, wrinkled and gray. Even more beautiful is this Pluteus granularis, which is wrinkled, but like velvety brown. Both really pretty mushrooms, rarely see them. Across the bottom row is something that's really astounding, and it's on everybody's life list that doesn't live in Illinois or Missouri. This is Pluteus mammillatus. It's so different that for a time it even went by a different genus name, Chamiota. This is the veiled Pluteus. You see it has a ring there, has an annulus. Who's ever seen a Pluteus with a ring? So if you want to see this thing, you have to go pretty much to Missouri or Southern Illinois, and that's it. And it's astounding. All mycologists always want to see this thing. And even more amazing is this orange stem thing here in the bottom right-hand corner. This is a Pluteus that's kind of yellow, olive brown top, and this striking, garish, kind of carmine pink stem. So an amateur in the Wisconsin club who knew mushrooms pretty well and was a really good observer showed me this thing, oh, it was quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Showed me this thing and said, what do you think this is? I think it's a Pluteus. I keyed it out. It can't be anything other than a Pluteus, but it doesn't look like a Pluteus. It's not boring. And I looked at it and said, yeah, this has got to be a Pluteus, but I've never seen anything like this. So I looked in all of the books and everything I had, and it matched no description. So I said, well, I know who the North American authority is on Pluteus. It's a graduate student in Illinois, working with Walt Sundberg down in Southern Illinois, Drew Menace. So sent the specimens to him and photos and everything. He said, oh yeah, this is a new species, all right. So sure enough, new species described, and it was again found by an amateur in the Wisconsin Mycological Society. So anyone dialed in, you too can make amazing discoveries. And just when you think a group of mushrooms is boring, sometimes you'll see some that are actually pretty amazing that kind of keep you focused. So I think that's, how much time did I have? Did I go a little over? Yeah, so it's been an hour and 6 minutes. So I think we'll wind up there, and hopefully that's encouraging for everyone to kind of get out and look for morels, but look for other stuff too. There should be galliellas and devil's urns and other things out now too, not just morels. So see what you can find. So Patrick and Kathy, that is it for me. You have to unmute your thing.
Thank you, Britt.
Yeah, thanks.
Anybody have questions?
Unmute yourself to do that.
Or text me, like Brooke Reed just did. Hi, Brooke.
What is the YouTube channel that was mentioned with the mushrooms?
For the
IMH.
For the Mushroom Club?
Yes.
I'll put that link in the chat here in a minute.
Thank you.
Britt, have you eaten Schizophyllum commune before?
It's funny you mentioned that. I absolutely have. Strangely enough, it's a popular edible in Southeast Asia.
That's what I understand. Have you eaten it locally, ours?
No, that's another one of those cosmopolitan mushrooms that's all over the world, at least as far as we know. And also, it's very important to science. A long time ago, a very famous couple of molecular geneticists who were also mycologists, their last name is Raper. The Rapers did a lot of genetics work on the Schizophyllum because they have big chromosomes and a number of other things. So it's a popular mushroom for several reasons. I haven't really eaten it in North America, and I don't really have any intention on eating it ever again. And here's why. So it's very popular in Southeast Asia, and people pick it and then dry it, which is kind of weird also because when you pick it, it's already pretty much dry anyway.
Right.
So they pick it and dry it, and you can see big bags of it. It's real cheap. So what people do is they rehydrate it. And so if it wasn't already leathery enough, rehydrating this dried Schizophyllum now makes it even more leathery. So they will then dip it in batter and deep fry it. So you have all these little nuggets that are then dipped in some sort of a sauce. And like, isn't this delicious? I'm like, it's absolutely delicious. But the thing is, you could have cut my leather shoe up into little pieces and dipped it in batter, fried it, and put it in the sauce. It would taste exactly the same. So I don't know what the allure is other than it's something else you can batter, fry, and dip in a Thai dipping sauce. But in Southeast Asia, I've eaten it numerous times. It's very popular.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's out right now, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had a little cookout on a campfire at our house here, and a lot of the older wood on the wood pile was covered with the Schizophyllum. So they get fairly big. So, I mean, you could certainly give them a try. It's a beautiful mushroom. Most of the time they're kind of dried out and ratty looking, but they can be really pretty, kind of furry. And if you slice them crossways, you'll see how the gills are split and then kind of curl back, kind of in a neat fashion. It's a pretty mushroom, but
Yeah.
No great shakes. No great shakes to eat. I'd rather eat a Pluteus.
Thank you.
Daniel asked, what is the sickest you've gotten from eating a mushroom?
That's funny. I've never ever been sick from eating a mushroom ever. And I
Okay.
never will. And the reason is because it's just not worth the risk. So when I was an undergrad, the mycologist that taught me mushrooms was Sam Mazur, who just passed away a couple months ago. Sam Mazur knew all the mushrooms really well. He was afraid of eating almost any mushroom, and he was a doctoral student under the great Alexander Smith. And he had a story whereby, and Alexander Smith knew and pretty much named like half of all the mushrooms of North America. He had a story that Smith took all the students out foraying, as they did all the time, brought all these mushrooms back, and they were doing taste tests back in the lab on these hot plates. And Sam said he told Alexander that they had green gills mixed in with the lepiotas. And of course, Alexander flew into a rage for this upstart grad student trying to tell him his business. So sure enough, like everybody got sick except for Sam. So Sam said, you can't be too careful. You know, even experts make mistakes. And I like eating wild mushrooms, but it's definitely not worth the risk. I mean, I would rather eat, frankly, a Five Guys cheeseburger than almost any mushroom, frankly. So I've never gotten sick. I don't think I will ever get sick. I just don't take any chances with them. I do eat amanitas all the time, and it's one of my favorites. But again, I absolutely know what the mushroom is before I eat it. You know, I don't kind of guess at it.
Somebody also inquired when we're going to have the talk on the psychedelic mushrooms, but I think this is the year of many things we didn't anticipate, and it might be in the fall, it could be it's next year.
Yeah.
Right? There's no, because in a sense we're kind of booked up already.
Yeah,
so
seems like it.
Yeah, which is great. So we'll just see what happens. You'll find out in the newsletter. It's, you know, if you're remain a member and you get the newsletter, you'll find out.
Yeah, we're going to do a cooking taste for that too, right? We're going to taste the psychedelics.
Oh yeah, that would be really precious, wouldn't it? So hey, Brooke, BRUCH, Brooke. Do you want to unmute and comment whether or not the likelihood we might go have a NAMA foray in Missouri this year? All right, well.
Brooks texting me. I don't know if his mic is muted.
Oh, maybe he's not. Okay.
Brooke has texted me a question and wants me to tell about the time when I ate a bite of a destroying angel.
Oh my God.
So again, I've never gotten
fast,
sick.
I hope.
I've never gotten sick, but very often I do demonstrate to people that it's perfectly safe to handle and touch any mushroom, deadly mushrooms as well. It's totally safe to put them in your basket with edibles. The spores from deadly amanitas will not contaminate your edible mushrooms. Just, of course, don't mix them up and eat the dangerous mushrooms, but just to demonstrate how it's perfectly safe to handle them. It's also perfectly safe to taste them too. You can take a small taste from a destroying angel or a death cap and taste it in your mouth. Of course, spit it out, but it's actually perfectly fine. A lot of people think you should wear gloves or whatever. I've heard ridiculous claims, and that's just not true. They're not that dangerous, but again, you have to be sensible, and you can't eat them or mix them up with something else, but it's perfectly safe to take a taste or handle them. And that's part of how people get into trouble. There's a lot of poisonous plants and other things in nature that you take a taste, it's extremely bitter or foul tasting or something like that. That tells you something's wrong with it, but not poisonous mushrooms. Poisonous mushrooms usually taste just fine, including the deadly amanitas, and that's why people don't have any warning that what they're eating is deadly until they wake up dead the next day. So.
Well, anyway, I did talk to Brooke a couple of weeks ago, and if the NAMA foray is canceled this year for Missouri, it will be next year in Missouri.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
I know they're working on the following NAMA foray after Missouri was to be Actually, maybe I'm not supposed, well, I guess it's okay to say. They were working on one to be in Colorado for
Right.
after Missouri. But
And
the
I
Missouri,
think the timing was related to Telluride as well, wasn't it?
yeah, that's part of it. So and it was going to be mostly run by the Colorado Springs Club, the Pikes Peak Club, which I'm quite close with and do stuff with them every single year. But yeah, I was really hoping that they wouldn't simply cancel the Missouri NAMA and then not do one, because that's one of the best places, in my opinion, to have a NAMA foray, and that's one of the best organized clubs. So whatever the Missouri club does as a NAMA foray will be one of the best. It'll have
And they have
fantastic
a mycology element, and they even have like a subgroup within the club
Oh, yeah.
for mushroom
Yeah.
cooking and eating,
Yes, yeah, the incurable Epicureans.
which I would love to emulate at some point.
So the incurable Epicureans are really cool. They pick a theme and usually they hand out or tell the title of a book. Everyone reads the book. It's often some sort of a historical book that has an amazing meal or food item or drink or something. And it's really quite a big to-do that they really get into learning and immersing themselves. It's a really great group. I really like working with them, and it's not that far away. I mean, you can drive to St. Louis from Chicago in like, what, 5 hours or 6 hours. It's pretty easy. So, any other questions, Kathy?
By the way, Brooke said that more or less that's true, but there's an issue with maybe the venue for next year at Missouri, being able to get it back again. So we'll just wait and see, right? Nothing is what we expected this year to be anyway, so why would this be any different?
Yeah. I know there's in trying to plan for this summer, it's looking like it's going to be tough to do anything. But I mean, just even planning for fall, there's no way to plan for anything, and maybe even not for next year. So just have to play it by ear.
That's all we can do. Be flexible.
Yeah.
A couple of us have raised hands, so somebody should check that.
Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, I just want to remind people that this month was the last one that you will be getting a newsletter unless you renew. So please do renew. Plenty of ways to do it. And Galaxy Tab A also has a raised hand.
Okie dokie, I'll unmute that person. They can go ahead. Sorry, I hadn't noticed. Galaxy person. Yoo-hoo. You're unmuted. Well, now we know what it's like to be on radio, huh?
I was just saying about caller. Are you there?
Yes.
Brett,
Oh,
Hi.
what is the name of the Pluteus in Wisconsin? Is that published?
Yeah, it was on the slide.
It wasn't,
Arontopes.
what? Oh, Arontopes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The bottom of the slide wasn't shown.
No, it's not in the bottom of the slide. It's in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't put them on the bottom purposefully because even when I show slides on a screen, sometimes people's heads block them, but I
Right.
wasn't sure how it would look on these screens if it might be cut off. So I tried to put stuff kind of in the middle of the screen.
I need to email or contact Drew. He has a new species of Pluteus from Chicago area.
Oh,
We gave
you
it,
know where Drew is now, right?
he moves every 2 years.
Yeah, well, last few times I see him every year. Strangely, I see him every year, but in different places. He's been in Washington State for quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah. He works for the USDA out there.
well, let's see if there's anything new. Okay, dokie. Galaxy, I've tried to unmute you. You're not unmuting, so I don't know why. And we'll just have to. You can send us an email. We'll forward your question on to Britt. Well, Britt, thank you so much.
Finn has a question.
Oh, sorry.
When an amateur discovers a new species, do they get to name it?
Well, Patrick, you've named more new species than me. Why don't you answer that?
I named one. Or I
Okay,
should say we named one.
that's one more than me. Mine are all
They
mine
can
are all
certainly
still
suggest.
non-prop.
They can certainly suggest a name. In the old days, some mushrooms were named after people that found them, and now some mushrooms are named after people to be honorary.
Yeah.
And then to renew in the club, you can go to the IMA website and click on join, and there's a PayPal link there to pay dues. That's the easiest way.
Hey, can I add? This is Greg, just to add to the naming. So when we did Cantharellus chicagoensis, that was a group decision. We had the whole team thinking about what was the right decision. And I guess it was our amateur that came up with the idea that we really should focus on the geography. So it just becomes on the team and who ends up deciding on the name.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Britt, have you described new flies or insects?
No.
Oh, you send them to other people?
Yeah, I've never. I mean, I've seen lots of different mushrooms that had no name, and some of which got named, or maybe still have not gotten a name. If you saw that Gymnopolis paper that Greg Thorne just published, so some of the specimens there were specimens I found, and they got named by them. There's not been any flies I've ever seen that were not named. There's been parts of life cycles I've published for the first time, but I've never discovered a new species of fly, and I can't really identify down to species of fly anyway. I can do it to family just looking at wings, but I'm not that good with the flies. Not that I'm not good with mushrooms either, but so no.
Where do people get your Amanita book?
Oh, yes, they should know that. So you can go to the Fungi magazine website, fungimag.com, and there's big ads there. So until June 1st, it's 30% discount. After that, it goes up by $10. And June 1st, there'll be shipping. There you go. And in that book, you can see the Northwoods grisette, Amanita shawamaganensis.
That sounds exciting. Well, thank you so much for spending your evening with us.
Yeah, sure thing.
And
Luckily, all my beer held out.
Yes, terrific. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk later.
Okay, thank you. Thanks,
Welcome.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
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 Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thanks.
Bye.
Much. Thank you, Brett.
Yep. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye. Cool.
Mhm.